I knew I was in trouble the second I saw Linda standing on my porch with that clipboard. You know, the look like someone who already decided you're guilty and just came to deliver the sentence. It was one of those brutal Phoenix afternoons where the heat feels personal, like the sun's got a grudge against you. I'd just gotten home from crawling through an attic all morning, sweat dried into my shirt boots, still dusty, brain half melted. And there she was. She didn't even say hello, just looked at me and said, "We need to talk about your generator." That's when I should have shut the door. Linda was the HOA president, the kind who treated a neighborhood like a tiny kingdom. Perfect hair, perfect posture, permanent disapproval. You know the type. If there was a rule, she enforced it. If there wasn't one, she probably drafted it. Apparently, my generator sitting in my own driveway was a community concern. I told her I'd move it into the garage. That should have been the end of it. But she gave this little smile, the kind that makes you instinctively check your wallet. Then she tells me the real reason she's there. The HOA needed to borrow it. Not rent it, borrow it, for the annual board meeting. Backup power had failed, the AC might go out, people could get heat stroke. Suddenly this was a humanitarian mission. And apparently my generator was now community property. I remember leaning against the doorframe, staring at her, thinking, "You've got to be kidding me." So I told her I'd rent it. Professional rate. $200 a day plus a deposit. Standard stuff in my line of work. Her smile vanished like I'd slapped her. She tried the whole community spirit angle. I countered with, "This cost me $4,000. She got red. I stayed calm, and eventually she agreed, but the way she said yes, it wasn't over. You ever shake someone's hand and immediately feel like you just signed up for a future headache? That was the vibe. So that night I did what I always do. I wrote a contract. Real one. Terms, liability, deposit, the whole deal. Sent it over. She replied 3 minutes later with one word: unacceptable. I told her to rent one somewhere else. Thought that was the end of it. Next morning, the HOA treasurer shows up at my door holding a check for half the amount. No deposit, no contract. Just this sheepish look like he'd been sent into a lion's den with a butter knife. Nice guy, totally out of his depth. I showed him the contract, told him no deposit, no generator. He looked miserable, but he left. And that should have been it. But that's the thing about people who are used to getting their way. They don't see no as an answer. They see it as an obstacle. 2 days later, I get a call from another board member. Calm voice, polite tone, but underneath it, pure threat. Suddenly, I'm hearing about violations. Lawn height, work truck and driveway, petty stuff. The kind you only notice when you're looking for leverage. That's when I realized this wasn't about a generator anymore. This was about control. So I started documenting everything. Photos, measurements, timestamps. If you've ever dealt with people like that, you learn fast. Memory isn't evidence. Then Saturday morning rolls around and I'm enjoying a slow morning coffee, baseball highlights. Doorbell starts ringing like it's on fire. I open it and there's Linda, but not the polished version. Hair messy, eyes wide, panic. The AC at the community center had died completely. Now she needed the generator, right now. And here's the thing, for all the nonsense leading up to that moment, I could see it. She was actually scared. Not for herself. For the meeting, the older residents, the heat. So I gave her the terms again, same as before. This time she didn't argue. Sat at my kitchen table, signed the contract without reading it, wrote a personal check for $700 with a shaking hand. And I remember thinking, this is what desperation looks like. I loaded up the generator, hauled it over, set everything up properly, because if you do electrical work wrong, people get hurt. Not theoretical hurt, real hurt. When the AC kicked on, people actually cheered. And for a brief second, I thought maybe this whole thing would settle. Maybe this was the reset button. Yeah, no. Next day I show up at noon to pick up my equipment exactly when the contract said I would. Meeting's still going. People inside enjoying cold air like nothing happened. I knock. Linda comes out already annoyed. Says they just need another hour. I tell her that's another day's rental. That's when everything detonates. Suddenly I'm petty, unreasonable, holding people hostage. You ever notice how fast a business agreement turns into a moral argument when someone doesn't want to pay? So I walk around the building, stand next to my generator, and tell them calmly, pay the extension or I shut it down. Someone says, call the police. I tell them, go ahead. And right as I'm finishing the shutdown process, not even touching their wiring, the whole building goes dark. Breaker trips. Old system finally gives up the ghost. And in that moment, I saw something shift. Panic. Real panic. Because now it wasn't about pride. It was about a building full of people and a failing electrical system. They asked me to fix it. I told them my diagnostic fee. Linda looked like she was chewing glass, but she wrote another check. I spent the next hour digging into that panel, and what I found, man, corroded wiring, undersized system, Stuff that should have been fixed years ago. The kind of neglect that doesn't explode all at once, it just waits. Got their power back on temporarily, packed up my generator, got my deposit back after another argument, of course, and finally went home thinking, okay, now it's done. Then Monday I get a call from a detective. Turns out Linda had filed a police report. Said I extorted her, sabotaged the system, shook her down for money. I remember just sitting there on my couch, phone in my hand, feeling that cold drop in your stomach, the one where you realize someone didn't just lose gracefully. They decided to burn the whole field. But here's the thing, documentation is boring until it saves your life. I walked into that police station with a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Emails, photos, contract checks, timestamps, everything. The detective barely made it halfway through before she leaned back and said, "You're fine. No charges, no case, just a civil mess." And that should have been the end, right? Nope. Lawyer letter shows up next. HOA demanding refunds, damages, emotional distress, which honestly I had to laugh at. Nothing says emotional distress like people who tried to strong-arm a contractor and got receipts in return. So I hired my own lawyer. Sent back a polite version of absolutely not. Then the retaliation started. Violation notices for things that didn't even exist. Garage door color, mailbox placement, a wreath I never owned. That's when the neighborhood started paying attention. Because once you shine a light on nonsense, people start noticing the smell. The Facebook group turned into a battlefield. Some folks thought I should have just helped for free. Others were done with HOA micromanagement and finally had someone saying out loud what they'd been thinking for years. Then came the meeting. Packed room. Tension thick enough to chew. Linda at the front trying to control the narrative. Me standing there with my folder like a walking audit. And one by one I dismantled every violation claim. Calm, methodical, no yelling, just facts. And you could feel the shift. People leaning forward. Board members looking at each other. That moment when a story stops being a rumor and becomes reality. Then someone asked how much the HOA had spent on legal fees going after me. $1,500. You could hear the oxygen leave the room. After that, it was like watching a dam crack. Questions, anger, votes. Within a month, the board got audited. Within 2, leadership changed. Linda was out. And here's the weird part: when it was finally over, when the dust settled, I didn't feel victorious. Not really. Mostly I felt tired, because none of it had to happen. A few weeks later, I ran into Linda at a grocery store. No clipboard, no armor, just a person. She said she wasn't going to apologize. Said she thought she was protecting the community. And I told her something I still believe: nobody wakes up thinking they're the villain. But power has this way of bending your reflection. If nobody pushes back, you stop noticing what you've become. She didn't argue, just looked tired. Then she left. I never saw her again. Life went back to normal after that. Business kept growing. Neighborhood calmed down. New board cleaned up the rules, made things reasonable again. Even got a letter apologizing to me and a check refunding my diagnostic fee. I kept the generator, of course. Still sitting in my garage. Same scratches, same rumble when it starts up. But now it means something different. Every time I see it, I don't think about the money or the drama. I think about boundaries. Because here's the truth: nobody tells you most conflicts don't explode because of one big moment. They build from 1,000 tiny compromises. 1,000 times you swallow something that feels wrong just to keep the peace. Until one day you don't. And when that day comes, people will call you difficult, petty, uncooperative, not because you changed, but because you stopped bending. Standing your ground doesn't feel heroic. It feels uncomfortable, awkward, sometimes scary, but it's also contagious. Once one person does it, others realize they're allowed to. That's what really changed our neighborhood. Not a generator, not a contract. Just one moment where someone said no, not this time. So yeah, if the HOA ever needs to borrow my generator again, I've still got a contract ready. Same terms, everything in writing. But honestly, I don't think they'll ask. And sometimes I wonder, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have just handed over the generator and hoped it all worked out? Because we all hit that moment eventually. The one where keeping the peace cost you something real. And when it comes, what do you do?